All right, let's talk about a guy who didn't just build a car company. He basically rebuilt the world as we know it. We're talking about Henry Ford, the farm boy who literally put the entire world on wheels.
Okay, to really get what Ford did, you gotta picture this. It's 1879. The world runs on actual horsepower, from horses. Cars, they're basically just expensive toys for rich people. Now, jump forward just 35 years to 1914. All of a sudden, half of all the cars on Earth are Fords. That's not just a change, that's a full-blown revolution. And that's what we're gonna unpack.
So here's the plan. We'll start with him as a farm boy who loved tinkering, then get into his early failures. Yep, he had them. After that, we'll hit the big stuff. The car for everyone, his wild $5 a day wage, and the big blind spot that almost tanked his whole operation. And we'll wrap it all up with his legacy.
All right, let's get into it. In this whole story, it doesn't start in some giant factory. Nope, it starts on a farm in Michigan with a kid who was supposed to be a farmer, but had, well, other ideas.
So Henry Ford was supposed to be a farmer, but he was all about machines. You can see it so early on. At just 12 years old, he gets a pocket watch, and what does he do? He takes it apart and puts it back together, just to see how it works. A year later, he sees his first steam engine, and bam, that's it. He's hooked. By the time he's 16, he's done with the farm. He packs his bags and heads straight for the big city, Detroit.
And this quote right here, it tells you everything you need to know. It wasn't just that he preferred machines, he genuinely hated farm work. And for him, it was personal. After his mom died, who he adored, that farm was just a painful reminder. So he wasn't just running to something, he was running away from a life he absolutely did not want.
But look, success didn't just fall into his lap, not even close. Before the Ford Motor Company we all know today, his journey was basically a highlight reel of setbacks and straight-up failures.
So get this, he started not one but two car companies that failed before he hit the jackpot. The first one, the Detroit Automobile Company, went under because production was just too slow and he couldn't agree with his investors. The second one, the Henry Ford Company, he just walked out on. Why? His backers wanted to build regular cars. But Ford was obsessed with building race cars to prove his engineering was the real deal. And here's the kicker. After he left, that second company got a new name, Cadillac. Yep, he basically founded Cadillac and then left.
But this is the key to understanding him. To Ford, these weren't failures. Not really. He saw them as chances to start over, but smarter. He learned what not to do. He learned about production problems, about sticking to your vision, and most importantly, about being your own boss. You could say those failures were basically the expensive tuition for the masterclass he was about to teach the world.
Okay, and that brings us to the main event. This is where everything changes. We're talking about the car that didn't just take over the market, it created a whole new one from scratch.
So, third time's the charm, right? With his new company, Ford had this vision that was just completely out there for the time. He wasn't building a luxury item. He said he was going to build a car for the great multitude. Think about that. He wanted it to be reliable, easy to fix, and so cheap that any working person could actually afford one. He was literally trying to democratize the car.
And how did he pull it off? Well, it was like a perfect three-part recipe. First, you have the car itself, the legendary Model T. Simple, tough, and built to last. Second, the material, this new thing called vanadium steel, which was way stronger and lighter than anything else. And third, the secret sauce, the moving assembly line, the idea that would change, well, everything.
And you'll never guess where he got the idea for the assembly line. A slaughterhouse. Seriously, he was in Chicago and saw how they had carcasses hanging on hooks, moving down a line from one worker to the next, and a light bulb just went off in his head. He thought, wait a minute, I can flip that. Instead of the workers moving around the car, what if the car moves past the workers?
So before this big idea, building a car was a long, slow process. You'd have a bunch of skilled guys all gathered around one car frame, putting it together piece by piece. The whole thing took about 12 hours. But with the moving assembly line, get ready for this. That time plummeted from 12 hours down to just 90 minutes. 90! That's not just an improvement. That is a mind-blowing leap in efficiency. Faster cars meant cheaper cars, and cheaper cars meant his dream was actually happening.
Okay, so the assembly line is a massive success, right? But it created a whole new problem, a very human problem. And the way Ford solved it was honestly just as revolutionary as the assembly line itself.
I mean, just think about it for a second. The work was brutal. You're not a craftsman building a whole car anymore. Now you just stand there all day tightening the same bolt over and over and over. People hated it. The turnover rate was through the roof, threatening the whole operation. So what do? How do you get people to do that kind of work?
He did something that nobody, and I mean nobody, saw coming. In 1914, he announced he was going to pay his workers $5 a day. $5! That was more than double what anyone else was paying. All his competitors thought he was completely insane. They were sure he'd go bankrupt. But it wasn't insanity, it was pure genius. See, his biggest problem was that nobody wanted to stay. So what did doubling the wages do? Boom! Problem solved. Suddenly, the best mechanics in the country were lining up to work for him. With a stable crew, he could run the factory 24/7. But here's the real magic. He wasn't just being a nice guy. He was creating a loyal workforce, and this is the big one. He was paying them enough to actually buy the cars they were building. He created his own customers.
But Ford's story isn't a fairy tale. And ironically, the very thing that made him so successful, that intense, single-minded focus, ended up being his biggest downfall.
So while Ford was busy perfecting his one car, the Model T, the one you could get in any color so long as it is black, the rest of the world moved on. Companies like GM and Chrysler started doing something new. They started offering people choices. You want a red car? You got it. You want more comfort? No problem. They started rolling out new models every year. People didn't just want a car anymore, they wanted their car.
And Ford? He just dug in his heels. He was stubborn. He thought he knew best, and he refused to change the Model T. And well, the numbers don't lie. In 1921, he was the king of the world, no question. By 1927, Chevrolet had blown past him, and by 1936, he was in third place. The guy who started the revolution was suddenly being left in the dust.
So, let's wrap this up. What is the legacy of this guy, who started all this in a little workshop in his backyard?
Henry Ford's legacy is just massive. And it's complicated. I mean, he gave us the assembly line, which changed how everything is made. His $5 day basically invented the American middle class. He took the car from a rich man's toy and made it a part of everyday life. But he's also a warning. His story shows you the incredible power of having a single, focused vision. But it also shows you the incredible danger of being so focused you can't see the world changing right in front of you.
And that really leaves us with one big question, doesn't it? When does that powerful conviction that lets a visionary change the world turn into a blind spot? When does your greatest strength become the very thing that holds you back? It's a tough question, and it's one that pretty much every great leader has to wrestle with eventually.